of Dragons and Dryads. The location is set in White Clay, Newark, in the state of Delaware, in the United States. Today we will be looking at the adventures of our two main characters, Misty and Cloud. Yes, their names are related. No, they are not related. Yet. The story takes place quite soon after they met, actually. To be precise, 4 days after they met. It takes place on a very, fateful day is certainly the term I would use. If you consider the fact that these two characters come from two very different backgrounds, from two very different origins, from very far away. And, in fact, they were very tired on this day. But they decided that maybe an adventure was a good idea. Maybe it was time to go out of their normal daily routine and seek that little thrill that you get when you walk into a misty forest just after noon. So you see, this happens in January, and in the month of January, Delaware is not a very warm state. In fact, one could even say it's quite cold. Sometimes there's snow, often there's ice, very often there's howling wind and pelting rain. But the most important part, the thing which marks this story the most, is that occasionally there are dragons. Now, you might not believe that. You might be thinking, certainly that's impossible. United States, dragons, in the same sentence. Seems absurd. But what people tend to forget is that dragons hide in mist. Mist is, after all, commonly nicknamed by the folk who believe in the true tales of old, Dragon's Breath. Now, Dragon's Breath is actually how this tale started, because believe it or not, our two characters met on a fateful day on the 1st of January 2020. They were simply at the right place at the right time. And that place happened to be a normal dormitory like any other, with no specific intricacies or anything interesting other to note than the fact that it was full of international students. Thus the name of the dorm, actually. It was called the International. Quite interesting, if I may say. But what makes it really remarkable is the fact that throughout the entire time, they were just simply leading their lives as normally as any other day. Nothing was specifically interesting. Until Cloud decided to send a single line message, basically, saying, "Would you like to go for a walk? Not an adventure. Not some crazy dragon-seeking quest. No, just a walk. Not even a hike. A simple, boring walk. What's fancy about that?" Nothing. Simply nothing. Because at that time, he was part of the masses who don't believe in dragons and dryads. He told stories of them. He was interested in their lore, the fantasy tales that many authors have scripted about over the centuries. But did he believe in their reality? Did he believe in their existence? Of course not. Why would he? No one else did. Now, this is where it becomes even more interesting. You see, although he had this constant denial of the existence of mystical creatures, he happened to have a name that related him to them, because, of course, a cloud is but a large group of mist. Fog is but a sleeping cloud, and all of those are related to dragons. Now, our story truly takes place as our two characters are venturing north from their university campus through a cold day on a Sunday, nothing interesting happening, no sights to see, a sleeping university full of sleeping students, for those who are still there. It was a winter semester after all. Why would anyone stay at university if they can avoid it? But they ventured north a bit more, They walked past the main street, then further north. They reached the outskirts of the campus, and at this point, their adventure was about to begin. They had no idea, of course. They were just happily chatting about their hobbies and their ideas and their futures and so many other things. Mostly, actually, it was quite pleasant. The rest of the adventure was certainly pleasant, but also full of intrigue. Now, as they approached the forest, or the woods, as one may call them, not very big forest, the wind started to be a slight bit noisier. They could hear it ruffle the leaves. They could hear occasional droplets of water falling, yet it hadn't rained for a few days. They could see remnants of snow. Hadn't snowed for a few days either. Occasional sheets of ice even. How interesting. The weather wasn't that cold. Now you see, for a good eye, for an experienced eye, these would all be signs of a magical presence. But for them, it was but signs to say, oh, it's slightly cold. It's a good thing we have large jackets. Let's go. Let's continue our walk north. You see, for Cloud had an idea of how far they were going to go. He had thought long and, I'm taking a new friend. It's probably not a good idea to take her too far. I don't know how athletic she is. Maybe she's going to be tired. It would be quite sad to make the poor person tired. I've barely met her. Certainly I can, bake her a nice cake when we get back and make some nice hot chocolate, but that's not really compensation if you kill the poor person's legs. Now, that being said, he still had an idea. He wanted to go to a very specific waypoint, known as the marker to him. Now, this marker was the union point of 3 states: Maryland, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. And it was at this time where he was thinking, well, it's a bit of a jog, but certainly not that bad. So off they venture into the forest, and he starts his favourite activity, which is to tell long and tall tales of mythical creatures hiding around, until, of course, the mythical creatures become real. Now, that is when things become very, very intriguing. Because, of course, he was talking in the figurative sense. Oh, look, a bit of mist. It must be a dragon, he would say, until you hear a soft snore. And then you start to question, are these tales? Or are his eyes deceiving him and he is seeing but the mist, when there is in fact a dragon hiding? Now, this leads us further and further into our tale, as he realized that things aren't always as they seem. Things aren't always as easy to recognize as he might wish. And the first thing he realized was the fact that no matter how hard he looked, it must have been just the water. Gushing water, after all, makes noise. Cracking ice, that makes noise. Footsteps make noise. What was he truly hearing? He had no idea. So as they venture north, obviously following the beaten path, he continues on his tales. He says, oh, just imagine if that gnarly tree turns out to be the face of a dryad. And as he speaks the name, a small, high-pitched laugh reaches their ears. Nothing threatening, nothing scary. Almost like a child, but not quite as, infantile. It wasn't anything spooky or worrying. It was just a little laugh. One that told them it must have been a rustle of the wind. It must have been the leaves. Yet laughs are not really known to be trees' language. They usually creak and groan. So a laugh is something a little new. There were very few birds at this time, of course, due to the cold, so it couldn't possibly have been a bird. So in continued denial, he continues his tale. They walk further north. Misty looks at him, asking him, "Cloud, how far exactly are we going?" And he said, "Oh, well, a little bit further. I mean, we're about halfway there." Now you see, they'd been walking at a decent pace. So at this point, halfway there wasn't too bad. They'd only been walking for about maybe 40 minutes. So they continue on their way. The ground is getting a bit mushy, a little bit muddy, but nothing too bad. The path is still well beaten. Many people have walked it before them. And they continue. Now, as they venture further north, things become increasingly interesting. You see, through white clay there is a river. And this river is where dragons lay. Not one, not two, but many. For in fact, due to the unpopular nature of the area, the dragons felt quite comfortable there. And later on, Cloud and Misty will come to know them as friends. But first, they had to meet them. Now, as they're jolly walking along, happily just telling their tales, happily experiencing every moment of it, in a positive way, to be said. They're there walking along, enchanted by the magic of the area, although it seems normal to them. At that moment, just as they look over the water, ready to take some lovely pictures of the fog and mist laying down on the river, Misty calls out and says, "Cloud, is it me, or is the fog winking at us?" And he looks, and believe it or not, in front of his eyes, there lay a dragon, calmly floating on the water, not sinking by a nail, not sinking by a claw or a scale, just lying there, utterly peacefully, winking at them, just repeatedly batting its eyes, as if to say, "Humans, what are you doing here? It's far too cold for your kind. Go home." He wasn't even judging them. That's what they thought. Obviously, when you see a dragon for the first time, you're terrified. What do you expect? It's huge. It's massive. And it's floating. That's obscure. You know, every dragon in any tale you've ever listened to or heard or read, the dragons always seem to be massive. How could they possibly float? Well, because, as the fateful name goes, he was a mist dragon. And mist dragons have the very strong ability to lay on water. Or on the ground for that matter, but they prefer water. Keeps them nice and cool. Now, as he lay there and observed these two frightened humans, he decided it was probably time to introduce himself. Now, wait, did you hear that right? Introduce himself? A dragon? Introducing himself to humans? That seems absurd. Well, it could have been, but it wasn't. Because in fact, the dragon looked at them and said, in a sigh, "You dear little creatures. If I wanted to eat you, I would have done it before. And honestly, look at you both. There's nothing to eat. I'd have to pick my teeth with you. It's boring. Now, I do have two questions for you. Where on earth are you going on a day like this? And my second question is, who on earth are you? To venture, outside. Now, it's strange. What obscure little humans you are. And, well, I feel like I have a third question for you. What are your names?" Cloud, Misty, look at each other. They're in utter confusion. A dragon is addressing them not only to talk to them, but he's even asking them questions and telling them to give him their names. Now, this is something quite strange, because of course not only are they bewildered by the fact that dragons are real, either that or they're sharing a common hallucination which seems improbable, or the fact that this dragon is kindly asking for their names, certainly with a bit of a demanding tone, but he's quite polite. So with a bit of a shudder, a bit of a hiccup, some fear, Cloud looks up, and just before he speaks, Misty steps forward and in quite a loud booming voice actually, she said, "Afternoon, Sir Dragon. My name is Misty, and this is my friend Cloud." The moment he hears, the dragon that is, the moment he hears her name, he roars a booming laugh so loud that the poor frightened animals who were hibernating nearby wake up startled and run away, leaving behind their meagre possessions in utter fright at this noise. He laughs some more. The water trembles. He laughs some more. Rapids are formed. And as he laughs, the two little humans, our two main characters, are starting to question the length of their lives. They are wondering, oh no, was he joking about eating us? Is he going to? And so the dragon turns to them and says, well, us dragons don't have names. We are known simply by our age. And in my case, I am known as Mist the Eternal, because I have lived so long that no one is able to recall my true age. Not my kind, not the other fantasy folk, as you humans call us. Now you see, Misty, Cloud, rarely have I met humans with names that intrigue me. And I have to tell you, it is an absolute pleasure to meet you both. To this, Cloud looks at Misty, she looks at him. They are so confused that they remain speechless. To which the dragon responds, with a quite angry tone, in fact. You do know, in good manners, you should say at least something like, well met, Sir Dragon, or at least nice to meet you, not just retort with silence. Who do you think I am? To this, the two of them, with soft voices, say, nice to meet you, Sir Dragon. Sorry for our manners. We haven't met any dragons before. Oh, don't stutter, he says. I know full well that I'm larger and scarier than you expected, but come on, I'm not ugly. You've seen me often, you just didn't know it was me. Well, then again, I say that. You could have met one of my brothers. Wouldn't recommend that. They're quite boring. Spent the rest of eternity with them, and you know what? They're not very fun. We all share the same name, by the way, so it's quite difficult to know who's who. In fact, we started calling each other by numbers until we ran out of numbers. That was boring. Yeah. Do you guys have a book? A book, Sir Dragon? Yes, a book. I love reading. Well, it's terrible to turn pages with these wet hands of mine, but sometimes people are willing to read for me. Occasionally, even the Dryads will. Why, I'm afraid, Sir Dragon, we don't have a book with us right now, says Misty. Now, to this the dragon retorts with a very sad voice. Ah, well, I guess it can't be helped. Do you have any jokes to tell me? I'd love a good joke. And so their conversation goes on for quite a while. Him asking for jokes, then stories, maybe even some childhood memories they have. And each time, he responds with a laugh, a chuckle, sometimes just nods of agreement. And when they exhaust his questions, which seems impossible because it's been a good half hour, he looks at them and says, "You know what? I can't really give you anything, as I'm made of mist and hold no possessions. What I can give you, though, is knowledge." And he leans over. They're slightly frightened, but they let it happen. And he leans over them more and more, reaching over, and he touches them each on the brow with his snout. And with a wet, damp feeling, their minds seem transported, just for a second, just long enough to know that who they met is truly a dragon.